Story 1. I've always been the type to travel alone, no fuss. I like to save money, and when I found that cheap Airbnb in a small town in the countryside, I didn't think twice. The ad was simple: a room in a shared house. The host seemed chill based on the reviews, so I booked it. When I arrived, he greeted me with an exaggerated smile, one that looked a bit forced. As soon as I stepped into the house, one thing bothered me: the smell. It was a heavy odor, somewhat sweet and rotten at the same time, like spoiled food mixed with mold. He noticed my expression and laughed, saying that the house was old, that the smell always turns out like that in the summer. I thought it was strange, but I let it go. He led me to my room at the end of the corridor, and that's when I noticed a door closed with a rusty padlock. I asked, half without thinking, what was inside, but he just looked away and changed the subject, talking about coffee times and house rules. The first night, I slept poorly. The smell seemed to have worsened, and now I could detect a tinge of iron in it, almost like blood. I tried to ignore it, but something woke me in the middle of the night. A low, repetitive noise. It was a dragging sound, followed by small taps, as if something were scraping on the other side of the locked door. I held my breath and listened for a few minutes, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe a rat, I thought. But then, the noise changed. It became more insistent, as if someone was trying to open the door from the inside, gently pulling on the doorknob. I lay frozen in bed, feeling cold sweat trickle down my back. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that it was only paranoia from being in a strange place. But a part of me knew that wasn't normal. The next morning, when I left the room, the smell was even worse, almost unbearable. It seemed to come directly from that locked door. The host was in the kitchen, whistling some random tune, as if nothing were wrong. I mustered up the courage and asked again, this time more directly, "What's in that room?" He stopped whistling immediately. He stood still for a few seconds, as if deciding what to answer, then let out a short, nervous laugh. I just store some junk there. It's all kind of moldy, hence the smell." I didn't believe him for a second. His expression was off, as if he were more worried about my question than about what was really inside. I decided not to press the issue, but my urge to get out of that house as quickly as possible was strong. When night fell, I tried to distract myself by watching something on my phone, but around 2 in the morning, the noises returned. Only this time, they were different. Instead of scratching, I heard a dull thud, as if something had fallen inside the locked room. Then came a dragging noise, long and heavy, followed by a deep, irregular breath. My heart raced. That wasn't a rat. It wasn't an old plumbing issue. It was something alive. Gathering courage, I tiptoed out of the room and went to the door. I pressed my ear against it and held my breath. Silence. But as I started to move away, the doorknob turned by itself. I ran back to my room and locked the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to convince myself that I had seen it wrong, that maybe it was a reflection of light, or just my imagination. But then, something made my blood run cold. Footsteps in the corridor. Slow, dragging, passing by my door and stopping. Right in front of it. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the gap under the door. I saw nothing but the smell. The smell was now unbearable, so strong it seemed to permeate my skin. A slight creak echoed, as if someone were leaning very close to the door. My stomach churned with pure terror. Then, out of nowhere, everything stopped. No sound, no smell, just absolute silence. I sat like that for over an hour, until I gathered the courage to leave. I grabbed my things and headed straight for the exit. But the host was already there, standing at the door with a weird smile. "Leaving already?" he asked, as if he knew something had happened. I tossed the key on the table and said I needed to go. He didn't say anything, just watched me as I left. When I got into the car, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still there, at the door, watching me. In the exact moment I started the engine, I swear I saw the doorknob of that locked door turn again. Story 2. From the start, something felt off about that Airbnb. My girlfriend and I just wanted a quiet weekend, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The ad was perfect. A charming little house, private, in a peaceful neighborhood. The host, A guy named Elias seemed friendly over messages, always very helpful. But as soon as we arrived, he greeted us in a strange way. His smile was too wide, his eyes fixed, and he spoke with exaggerated enthusiasm. He insisted on carrying our bags, showing us every detail of the house and suggesting a ton of outings, even after we said we just wanted to rest. I found it annoying, but I shrugged it off. Some people just have no sense of personal space, right? But then the visit started. On the first night, we heard a knock on the door around 8. It was Elias holding a basket of homemade bread. We thanked him, a bit awkwardly, and closed the door. 10 minutes later, another knock. "I brought some tea that goes with the bread," he said, already extending the bottle before we could even wait. I felt uncomfortable, but my girlfriend insisted that he was just trying to be kind. We accepted it and he left. Or so we thought. Because that night we heard footsteps in the backyard. Low, cautious footsteps. When I looked out the window, I saw no one. But the feeling of being watched was impossible to ignore. The next day, we tried to brush off the weirdness and went out for a walk. When we returned, I noticed something odd. The front door was slightly ajar. I was sure we had locked it before leaving. We entered cautiously, my heart already racing. Apparently nothing seemed out of place, but my girlfriend noticed that her makeup bag in the bathroom was open, with some items moved around. Maybe it was the wind, she suggested, trying not to panic. But who in their right mind would blame the wind for opening a locked door? Still, we had no proof of anything. We locked everything again and tried to relax. But that night, while we were watching TV, we heard the sound of a doorknob turning. Someone was trying to open the living room door, very slowly. I ran to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Elias. He was there, standing, holding a key ring, trying to find the right key. My blood ran cold. Before he could unlock it, I banged hard on the door. "What are you doing?" I shouted, trying to sound more angry than scared. He froze for a second, then laughed nervously. "Ah, sorry. I thought you'd gone out. I came to leave some more bread." We fell silent. He jiggled the keys in his hand and took a step back, still smiling. "Well, good night then." And he left as if nothing had happened. My girlfriend was pale. At that moment, we decided that we'd leave there first thing in the morning. We couldn't sleep properly. Every little sound made my heart skip a beat. The worst part was knowing that Elias had a key to the house and that nothing was stopping him from entering in the middle of the night. Around 3 in the morning, we heard a creak coming from the bedroom window. My girlfriend, trembling, pointed to the curtain. Something was moving on the other side. I took a deep breath and, on impulse, pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the dark, empty garden. But when I looked at the corner of the window, I saw something that chilled me. Finger marks on the glass, as if someone had been there, spying. As soon as the sun began to rise, we grabbed our things and ran to the car. Elias was outside, waiting. "Leaving so early?" he asked, forcing a smile. We tossed the key to him without replying. He caught it mid-air, not taking his eyes off us. When I started the car, he stepped forward and murmured something I almost didn't hear. "You'll be back, right?" We sped off without looking back. When we finally hit the road, I let out a sigh of relief. But I still wonder, what would have happened if we had slept a little longer that night? Story 3. I've always been the type who needs silence to write. When I found that secluded Airbnb in a rural area, it seemed perfect. The owner, a lady named Margaret, was friendly over messages, saying that the house would be entirely mine, with no neighbors nearby, no noise, no distractions. Exactly what I needed. When I arrived, everything seemed normal. The house was rustic but cozy. However, on the living room table there was a note. "Sorry I couldn't welcome you in person. If you need anything, my employee Ray is nearby doing maintenance." Okay, cool. I just didn't expect him to be around all the time. On the first day, Ray showed up about 3 times. First to check the pipes, then to inspect the back fence. In the late afternoon, he came by again, saying he was going to cut some firewood nearby. He was a quiet guy, kind of odd. He always stared a little too long before responding, as if he were processing my words in a different way. But it was fine. Some people are like that. I tried to ignore it and focus on my writing, but when night fell, I started to feel like I was being watched. And it wasn't just paranoia. because at one point I looked out the window and saw someone standing by the trees, motionless. It was him, just there in the dark, staring at the house. I closed the curtain and tried to convince myself that he was just resting or finishing some work, but something didn't make sense. He wasn't holding any tool, no axe, nothing. He was just standing there, as if waiting for something. After a while, I went to the kitchen to get some water, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling. But when I looked out the back window, I nearly dropped my glass. The porch light partially illuminated the backyard, and there, very close to the back door, I saw footprints in the dirt. Fresh footprints, and they weren't mine. I froze. How hadn't I heard anything? I locked all the doors and windows and went to my room, trying to stay calm. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to a sound coming from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. My heart raced. I grabbed my cell phone and tried calling Margaret, but there was no signal. The Wi-Fi, which had been working perfectly until then, had also gone down. I walked slowly to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. But then, a click. The doorknob turned. I held my breath, feeling cold sweat trickle down my forehead. Someone was trying to get in. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering. In my chest. The doorknob turned again, this time with more force. I locked the door immediately, holding my breath. On the other side, I heard a heavy sigh. Then, silence. I stood in the dark, waiting. Minutes passed. Then footsteps, but not leaving. They went into the living room. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something metallic scraping the lock of the front door. My stomach churned. Ray had a key. I ran to the window, already determined to get out of there no matter what. When I looked outside, I felt a chill run down my spine. In the middle of the yard, standing and staring directly at me, was him. Ray, motionless, as if he already knew I'd try to escape. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my backpack, unlocked the window, and jumped out, clumsily landing on the ground. I ran to the car without looking back. When I slammed the door and started the engine, I saw the porch light turn on. Ray was at the door watching me, his head slightly tilted to the side, as if analyzing my reaction. I sped off,